people say, well, everybody can't be the leader. You got to be followers. That's absolutely true. But I do think at its core component, leadership's about influence and impacting others and helping them. And we can all be leaders, even if we're just leading the reception desk at a company.
Hello and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here to talk about business, but we want to tackle topics that most business leaders shy away from. We believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. I am your faithful host, Jeff Ma, and as always, I'm here to have conversations and hear stories from real people about real business and real life. My guest today is Tim Lupinacci, and Tim is the CEO and chair at Baker Donelson, where he leads over 1,300 individuals in 23 offices across the southeastern U.S. Prior to becoming CEO 6 years ago, Tim spent the first 28 years of his legal practice focused on helping financial institutions solve complex problems in commercial restructuring and bankruptcy matters throughout the country. During his leadership journey, Tim chaired the Financial Services Department, the Baker Women's Pathways to Leadership Committee, and served as a member of the firm's Diversity Inclusion Committee. Tim is presently leading the firm's Baker Vision 2028 strategy and its Diversity Inclusion Compact. A lifelong leadership student, Tim recently launched a nonprofit called Everybody Leads, focused on empowering individuals in underserved communities with basic leadership skills and confidence to better lead themselves, lead others, and lead in the community. And I think in the introduction, I used the word lead or leadership at least 15 times. So it's fair to say we're here with a expert in leadership. Welcome to the show, Tim Lupinacci. How are you doing, Tim?
Jeff, I'm great, and I'm really excited to be here. As I've mentioned, I've really learned a lot from your book and your podcast, so really appreciate all your work and glad to be a part of it.
Very kind, very kind. And I normally ask, what is your passion to all my guests? I get the feeling I know part of the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Tim, what is your passion and how did you find it?
Yeah, Jeff, it really, among a few other things, but leadership has been my passion for a long time now. And it really started from a really epic failure in my career. I was a young lawyer and I did not have any lawyers in my family and I didn't really know the legal industry. I kind of joked that I stumbled into the profession, but I viewed it very transactional. I worked for a big firm. I'd get a project, I'd do the project, turn it in, and go on to the next project. And I was part of a team and working with a lawyer who was a little bit older, and we worked on this big project for a big bankruptcy case, turned it in, and next thing you know, a few hours later, we're getting Paige to come to our boss's office, and he's on a phone call with like a dozen lawyers. And he started cussing and saying, these idiots are going to stay here all night and get it fixed. And well, it turned out we had double counted some numbers in our calculations that everyone was relying on to go to court the next day. But I had done my part, right? I had turned it into the senior lawyer, and then he turned it in. So we stayed there, got it fixed. I'm thinking I'm going to get fired. And I had drawn the short straw to pick up my boss on the way to court the next day at his house. So I picked him up. It was pretty awkward silence for a while. And then he did apologize, and he said, I really shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people. But I wanted to tell you that I really think you have the ability to be very successful in this career, but you need to own your career. I see that you can be a real leader in this profession, but you have to own it, and you have to step up and be a leader and not just rely that you turned in something to somebody else. And that kind of, I appreciate his apology, but it really made me think, well, I'm not really sure that I know exactly what that means to be a better leader. I'd done some stuff in, college and things like that, but so it really launched me on this lifelong journey of I've got to learn how to be a better leader. And, through reading books and podcasts, and of course, back then listening to books on tape, just to really try to understand and get better at being a leader. And it so much influenced my life that I really have this passion to see others really step into it and lead better. So that's kind of the start of it.
Wow. For me, leadership is like this one word, and you can really just kind of think of it in a single-minded way. But from my experience, the deeper you dive into it, the more you look at it, there's just more and more to it. It's just such a big, broad thing. So as a, I guess, self-professed leadership junkie yourself, have you found more clarity in your journey here? Like, is leadership really this like got to think about everything everywhere all at once kind of thing? Or have you found like, what have you narrowed it down to something more simple? Like, can you define leadership in your own way today?
Yeah, that's great. And I love that movie Everywhere All at Once. It's a great reference. So it's like, yeah, now I'm thinking about that. No, but so one of the, and you mentioned the nonprofit I've started under this idea of everybody leads. And I know people say, well, everybody can't be the leader. You got to be followers. That's absolutely true. But I do think at its core component, leadership's about influence and impacting others and helping them. And we can all be leaders, even if we're just leading the reception desk at a company, that we can own that space and we can influence others. People that come in, we can see, if a colleague has a problem, we can try to help them solve that. And they may not have a fancy title, but they do have influence and impact. And so if you look at it in that lens, yeah, it's a very broad topic. I think the first book I read on it back when my boss had challenged me was that 26, 28, 29 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. And it just kind of goes from there. That there's all these things. But I've found that how I want to get better, try to get better every day is how am I influencing and impacting others? And part of that is, there are living out core values. There's some certain things that I really try to implement every day in leadership, in showing empathy and compassion, and listening is something I think is a key component of leadership. I think I kind of have an acronym that I put together that I really try to lead each day, just around the word courage. I need to show up. I need to be confident because I do have that fancy title, that I do have people that are relying on me to try to help lead. I need to be confident. I need to be out front is the O. I need to be unshakable, or that, if the things are going to happen that are going to get me kind of off track, resilient, things are going to go wrong. And then how can I bounce back? Be adaptable, have a growth mindset, and be an encourager. And so, yeah, it's a lot of things, but I find if I'm really focusing on living that out and really trying to invest in others by pouring into them, helping them achieve their success, that I am being a leader. And a lot of it can just be through influence and impact. So I don't know if I fully answered that question, kind of rambled a little bit, but I think if we just focus on how can we help others achieve their goals, that we're really going to hit the ball out of the park a little bit, I think.
Yeah, definitely. You've answered the question and more, and I have so many more now. So I'm trying to figure out where to start. I love this acronym. So your acronym for courage is interesting because at your core, are you saying that being an influential leader requires courage at its core? And can you define that a little bit? Because all the letters make a lot of sense, but then can you talk about the word courage itself?
Yeah, and it actually is a great question, Jeff. It started when I started really narrowing in on that acronym was right around the pandemic, the global pandemic in 2020, and nobody had the playbook, and we have a large organization, and we sent everyone home and and working remotely and all of that. But there was all this uncertainty, and I could find myself getting kind of deflated, or like when they extended the stay-at-home order. I literally remember. The first thing was like our state, I'm in Alabama, the governor said, be at home till March 31st, right? That was sometime in mid-March. Well, then sometime a week later, they said, well, that's been extended to April 30th. And I'm kind of down. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. How are we going to, but I just realized because I was a leader, I needed to really get courageous and needed to adopt something that was, my colleagues needed to see the courage in the face of the uncertainty. So, but I found that even as we've made it through the pandemic and everything, that's just the whirlwind of the day brings all kinds of uncertainties. It could be like our fiscal year ends January 31st. And so we're coming through that pretty recently. And clients in our industry had been a little slower paying this year. Well, that's something that we have to be very courageous. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? How do we keep moving forward? Maybe there's some things we can do to collect more on some more current invoices to make the year that we need to make, or things like that. So I think it served me well. And it kind of also was born out of starts with the pandemic, but I was also reading that book at the time about Churchill, that Eric Larson wrote, I think the Vile and the Evil, or the Vile and but Churchill was a lot about courage and about know the brutal reality of your situation, but have the encouragement, not based in myths, but that you can actually succeed and thrive if you really have that plan on how to move forward through it. So I think leadership is a lot of courage, and knowing that not everyone's going to agree with everything you do, and you got to say, well, if I believe this is the best thing that I'm doing for my team, for my firm, for my company, I need to step forward and keep doing it. So that's kind of how I think courage has served me well, I'll say, and still does.
I love that. And it brings me to this thought where a lot of the struggles I see leaders have, and in their head, it's an either or kind of lever to pull.
Mm-hmm.
But help me understand your perspective on this. There's this idea that many would read your kind of courage statement, and maybe even some of the things within it, like confident, unshakable, some of these elements that are in it, and they might translate that as I have to be strong and kind of lead the way, have all the answers, and be like, take all the hits and all these things. But there's this other concept of, I guess, vulnerability and kind of servant leadership and all these other things that I wouldn't say are polar opposites, but people find themselves at odds, because there's also strength in a leader who has the courage to say, I don't know the answer. I don't know what I'm doing. I've messed up. I'm sorry. Like these types of things. Can you help me balance in your head? What's the right mix? What is that best version of that leader look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I heard somebody make a comment that while the 20th century may have been about IQ, like intellectual, and strong leader, control and command and control leadership, that the 21st century is more around EQ, that emotional quote, intelligence. And I found that true. I mean, first of all, for the very fact that I don't know everything, I don't know a lot. I feel like I'm always trying to learn because I want to get better and try to do it. That I found that you build trust. I've built trust and authenticity with my colleagues by being vulnerable and saying, yeah, not only did I make a mistake, but I heard you and we fixed it, and here's what we're doing about it. Or, yeah, we've let some things down because I'm not in the trenches every day and we didn't really realize it, but I hear your feedback and now we're going to act on it. Those are things I think are invaluable. And we've had a lot of success as a company the last several years. And a lot of that is this, to me, comes back from that point that we have that openness for feedback, for listening, for admitting that we've made mistakes, that I don't know everything, but then adjusting and moving forward, which is kind of in my courage acronym is kind of the adaptable thing. Like we got to be ready to do that. Now, I will say there are times that I have to be confident and absolute in making the decision and moving forward. And it may not, like, it's not a popularity contest, and particularly if it's in the best interest of the company, because individuals, it may be in an individual's best interest, but I mean, how does that interact with the company's best interest? And that's where I actually have a lot of learning and work to do, because I tend to fall on more of the side. I like to get everyone like me. I want everyone to say, oh yeah, Tim heard me. And I want to hear folks, and we're going to make changes when we can, but we can't do it all. And also another component of that. So I try to balance it. I try to keep getting better. I realize that I've got to focus on the best interest of the organization. But the other thing is to surround our executive team has some folks who are probably a little bit more on the end of the spectrum of, well, no, I see clearly this is what we need to do. Let's just go do it. And that helps also that we can have the really vulnerability amongst ourselves to kind of disagree about certain things, but then we get to a point of moving forward where it's kind of in the middle. So anyway, I think it's a combination of all of it. But for me, I found that I think that that's how you build buy-in on what you're trying to accomplish, is when you can bring people along and understand that. So
I like that. The one that stands out for me is out front. Can you talk about what that means for courage?
Yeah, some of it was, I mean, I was in theater some in college and high school. So, I mean, I know you're being out on the front of the stage, but, as a lawyer, I kind of did my thing. I had to be out in front in court, certainly. But then in leadership with, 1,300 people, as you mentioned, there's a part of me that particularly in the pandemic time, that I just want to kind of like, I want to be like everyone else and kind of hole up and like try to figure, what does this mean? How do I deal with this? But I realized that because I was in this position, I needed to be out front. I needed to share my vulnerabilities. I mean, I shared that story. Like, we'd started doing daily video updates, and some of it early on was about, well, we're going to home, we're going remote, what does that mean, and things like that. But then it just got to, it was a way to keep connected with our people. And I would do a video like talking about, like, I can't believe that I got the governor extended it a month, but we're working through it, we're going to keep doing it. Or there was one time we had a series of board meetings about really important stuff, and a lot of Sundays, and I finally got to and we've been working all weekend, I got to a Sunday night at 5:00, and I texted our COO and I said, I just got to go out to the back porch and listen to some music, and I'm going to disconnect for 2 hours. Give me 2 hours to step away to recharge, and then come back and get engaged. But I told that story after the fact. I mean, I didn't do it to set up a story, but I just realized I need to be vulnerable. This is hard, right? And so I think that that is what I mean. It's also there's a component of that I know Tim, and I know I do need some downtime. I need some time that I'm doing, like running in the morning is important to me because it's some Tim time to think. I try to do a digital Sabbath for 24 hours over the weekend. People can get me on text if they need to, but I try not to just keep checking emails because I need to recharge. But I need that to then be out front on the other times, or when I'm visiting an office, I need to walk the halls. And I mean, I enjoy walking the halls, but I don't need to just stay in my hotel until a dinner that night, right? So those are some ways that it works for me, and what I mean by that.
My last kind of, well, not my last curiosity, but the last one I have time for probably is around this this universe you work in, where I'm hearing you talk about all this leadership and these qualities that really build a strong culture. And then I think of I guess law and the legal world, and not to generalize or stereotype, but I think there is a stigma around what it takes to cut it in a law firm and in that world. And a lot of it contradicts often, at least in people's minds, what builds a more loving and caring culture. Yeah. Can you speak to that broadly, at least from your perspective, and how you're able to kind of apply that at Baker Donelson?
Yeah, Jeff, you're spot on. I mean, and you said, you're right, it's generalizations, but when you look at you do those personality tests and stuff, lawyers are much more skeptical than the general population. They're much more individualized. They want more to be in control. And obviously, because they've done that extra education, they're all very smart, and oftentimes have that perception. They feel like they're the smartest person in the room. And so you've got all that to navigate and then how is a lead? And it's a very flat organization. We've got 300 shareholders who are owners of the firm that that have to have input and impact, and you have to kind of bring them along. So that goes back to what I've tried to do in building those authentic relationships with people, the trust, to build trust, that they can come to me with feedback, and they can know that I'm going to listen to them and not do everything that they want, but try to build that relationship has really been invaluable. And with that feedback, we've launched a vision that is based on what the clients want, and it's helping our colleagues succeed. So they're seeing some momentum now that also says, okay, well, this is some good stuff that if I collaborate, even though I would prefer to work by myself and get it done, if I collaborate, it's going to help me. It's going to help our clients, and it's going to help me even economically. So some of it is just really spending the time. I like to talk about, breaking bread and sharing things. I love getting around the dinner table because I think you're more apt to just get to know individuals. So that's one side of it. The other thing I spend a lot of time on too is to try to, and this is some change management, and it's not, I mean, I think it's a work constantly in progress of, our professional services and staff are invaluable to us serving our client, and every one of them is a leader, and every one of those individuals, it's not the hierarchy of, if you have a law degree, you should be dictating, well, you work for me, even though that may be, the truth in the sense of an owner. Now, again, it's a work in progress, but as people start to trust and build that in, it's more of us working together as a team. So I try to really, and I talk about the value of our staff and our business services professionals. We just had a town hall today that was the entire firm, and we talk about all the same things with everyone, just about how important it is to try to drive forward, not about drinking the Kool-Aid, but about how can we work together. So yeah, it's something that it's taken a lot of work, but hopefully it's bearing some dividends by the relationship and the trust.
As a kind of devil's advocate
Yeah.
question, like, you have a hotshot attorney who thinks they know it all and they treat everyone around them as such, and they're in your organization. Like, can you talk a little bit about either systems or processes or programs that you've considered or placed to help alleviate this, I'm just going to call it, hypothetical situation? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and again, it's where the line can be very, like, if you get in the middle, there's some people that, like, in the middle of a heated situation, get aggravated or whatever things, we all can do that. But we do have we value our culture. I know every company does it, but we really try to live it out in the context of, we're going to respect each other, we're going to treat each other with dignity, and we're going to, as a professional. And so we really do dock even those high performing, rainmakers, the people with big books of business. If they're mistreating people, or they go off the rails on somebody or whatever. Now, certainly if it's first time, sit down, talk to them. We may even talk about, coaching, depending on the situation, talk about how we, that's unacceptable. And then ultimately, if that doesn't work, we have had those difficult decisions of, releasing some of our top performers back into the marketplace to let them go figure out where to plan elsewhere, which is a very hard thing when you're trying. We had several plateau years before I became in the role, so we really were focused on driving growth. But then if you have some big chunk that's leaving, and ultimately you come to agreement that, yeah, this is nice, you go do this stuff other place. But it does send a message too that you can't, we're not going to stand for that. So I think that's another way that instead of just talking it, you have to live it out, and it's not easy, but
that is impressive. I mean, I'll just say, working with a lot of organizations, that is the hardest thing for them to do, is to take someone who's bringing in bottom line by the numbers, but saying, hey, we're holding you to a higher standard, and having that conversation alone is tough, much less taking action and putting your money where your mouth is. Because I truly believe that culture is, it's the worst behavior that's tolerated. Right. So
yeah,
that's
I
impressive.
totally agree. And it was hard. I mean, but now, now that's a couple of years, whatever ago. And then we've had historic revenue the last 3 years, continue increasing. And that was, at the time, that was like, are we going to be okay with this? But that can't be the decision. It was unacceptable what this person was doing. So anyway, I agree with you that you got to live out the culture, and you got to take those steps, or else it's meaningless. The words you say are meaningless, right?
Yeah, I love that. And that to me actually is that word courage you said. Lived out. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, I mean, going into that meeting, the night before at a hotel room, like, it was like, this could go a lot of different ways. I was really, I mean, it is. I mean, I think and I'm not talking about Tim, but it does take courage to do that as a leader.
Yeah.
Because you've got to help your company thrive. And if it's a big impact on that, it is a big deal, but I think you'll come through it on the positive end, because people will see that you're living out your values. So
Tim, one last question. What's one behavior that you see every great leader do? Something you can see them do. What's that one behavior you'll see every great leader do?
Well, I think this is true, and the Leadership Challenge by Posner and Kouzes, they've said they've interviewed people like for 25 years, asking what are the most admired traits in leaders, and number one, year over year, any geography, is honesty. And I think that comes back to, it kind of circles back to what I've said earlier. I really do think being honest, being authentic, admitting mistakes, I think that honesty piece is so critical. I mean, there's a lot of it like caring and being genuine, but I think being honest. And I think that I've seen that as a pretty important trait to the great leaders.
Great answer. Can you talk a little about upcoming projects? I think you've been working on a book. Maybe you could share about that a little bit real quick.
Yeah, so it's called Everybody Leads. Again, I've got the nonprofit, but this whole idea that whether you have a title or corner office or no matter where you are in your journey, you are a leader because you're influencing people and you're impacting people, just the people you're around, whether it's in the community, church, synagogue, at your office, fast food restaurant. You are impacting and influence people. So it's some real practical tips to try to tell us how can we get better at being a leader. And it's with a lot of these ideas we've talked about today and just examples of colleagues. So it's coming out in June. So I'm real excited about that. And so we'll see. We'll launch it into the world.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share or plug or people reach out to find you? Any information on that?
No, I mean, I'm at bakerdonelson.com, which is our firm. You can find me there, and LinkedIn. I'd love to connect. And I did remember the Eric Lawson book is The Splendid in the Vile. So there you go. If you're looking for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for your time. It's been a real honor and a pleasure talking to you. I think I'm actually going to steal this courage acronym and play with it a little bit. But really appreciate the time you spent with us today.
It's been great, Jeff. Great, Jeff. Like I said, you're adding value to me often, so it's great to get to do this with you live.
Awesome. To our listeners, thank you so much. Thanks for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed this and all the other episodes we're putting out for you. Love as a Business Strategy, the book. We have at the time of this episode airing, I believe our second edition should be out. So we have a new second edition out on shelves. Please go check that out and support us. We appreciate it. And with that, we're going to be seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a good one.